I want to begin before everyone turn in your books to page 59. We're going to begin there, page 59. But before we start reading there, I want to take a moment to allow anyone who might have a question regarding anything that we may have covered or studied up until now. Any question at all that you might have? Any question at all? Okay. All right, that's quite fine. I want to also mention to you between now and Wednesday or next Sunday, if there's any question that you might have from anything we've studied since we began, write that down and get that to me. I wanna before we transition out, I want to be sure to allow for some time to address any questions that you might have from any of the material that we've covered since we've started, okay? But now what we want to do, we want to look at this morning, we want to touch on the last two contexts out of the 5 contexts of purpose discovery. We begin our journey by identifying that there are actually 5 contexts of a person's life that Jesus gives us insight on. If we align these 5 contexts, it will serve as an indice or indicator of what each one of our individual life purposes might be. And this morning we want to look at those 2 last contexts, the context of our career and the context of our cross. So we want to begin reading on page number 59, if I have a reader. Everyone have a book this morning? Okay. Page 59, page 59. If we get a reader to start reading on page 59.
I guess I will.
Yeah, everybody don't fight for the mic. Don't fight for the mic.
Well, the Lord was just giving it to me,
Everybody don't
You
fight
can't
over
have
the
a
mic.
choice.
Go right ahead.
That wasn't me, that was the spirit.
Oh, whatever. I just saw your hand. Okay. The context of your career. Walk worthy of the vocation you have been called. The 4th context of purpose discovery is the context of your career. Jesus refers to the context of your career in this passage when he says, yes, and your own life also. The context of your career has to do with your livelihood or whatever is your means of making a living. It includes whatever produces your income, such as your job, occupation, training, education, and ultimately your purpose. Thus far, we have spoken of God's purpose as if it were a single choice or a primary vocation in your life. However, it is quite possible for God to simultaneously call you into a number of secondary vocations or sequential careers in a single lifetime, while using each career to evolve you into his purpose. A person, for example, can have a career of being a teacher, a singer, a business person, a preacher, a homemaker, a scientist, an attorney, an author, etc., or any role, vocation, or occupation which can evolve into your lifelong purpose. In some cases, these income-producing careers may be separate and apart from your lifelong purpose. In other cases, they may be influential, but they always work toward the overall fulfillment of God's purpose in your life.
Okay, stop right there. Somebody explain, give a summary of what we just read. What did the author just state? What's the point? Somebody give a summary of what we just read.
It's kind of like, to me, that all the jobs that you starting from your first job, usually it's kind of like, it may be kind of like something that gears you, all the jobs that you have gears you toward your purpose job or the purpose God's have for you. And in other words, like myself, I started babysitting at a young age, really with my baby sister, started babysitting her. And my first job was a babysitting job. And the next was nursing homes, then private setting, then assisted living, then the state school, and now I'm a substance abuse counselor, caring for other people with substance use. And to me, all those jobs led up to, because I'm a caregiver, and every job that I've had has been in that type of field. And I'm thinking
Amen,
that
amen.
maybe that's the purpose God has for me, is to care for others.
All right, okay. All right, very good, Sister Neal. Anybody else? Summary of what we just read. What did the author, what's the point that he's trying to make in what we just read? As it relates to, keep in mind, everything that's been written is designed to actually communicate and lead our thinking toward what our individual purpose in life might be. So what is his point here? And we're talking about the context of what?
A career.
Our career, okay. So he's trying to make a point as it relates to our individual purpose and then our career. What point is he trying to make? Sister Watson, Sister Spears will be that you got the mic right here, and then Sister Watson follow. Go ahead, Sister Spears.
So when I used to work for Workforce Solutions, I would have job seekers who, they might be looking to change their career or start over, start something new, or just find something in general. And I remember a lot of times telling job seekers, all work experience is good work experience. So they decide, should I put this on my resume? Should I talk about this? Should I discuss this in the interview? And I would remind them, all work experience is good work experience. Before kind of reading this part of the chapter, I would think, it kind of reminds me that God doesn't waste anything that you do. Everything that you do is somehow leading you to purpose, if you kind of see it that way. So he is going to use every work that you're doing to lead you toward purpose.
All right, very good, very good. Sister Watson has a mic.
Well, what I was going to say was definitely along those lines, but I also see it as a comfort because I wasn't always in the career I am now, although I always believed this was a career I was supposed to be in. But if you are in a job or a career that you don't think is your purpose, just know that God will use it to your purpose. So like Sister Spears said, it's not wasted. You're not necessarily outside of God's plan. It might be a pebble in God's plan, but he will use it towards your purpose.
Amen, amen. Anyone else? Sister Thomas?
Well, I worked a lot of, state school, serving at Luke, different things, worked at a lending place for over 20 years, and now I don't have any job, so I really don't know how to put that into being my purpose, 'Cause I love to serve. I've always loved helping other people. I just don't have the goods, I guess, to do that, but whatever I could do, I would do it, but then, now it's like, what is my purpose? I have no career, there's nothing I can do, so.
Thank you for that comment, because that's really the clarity that we want to get. Okay. Is the author implying, or can it be said, we're talking about discovering our purpose, is a person's job, when we talk about purpose, discovering your individual purpose, is your career your purpose? What do you say, Brother Osborne?
It has the possibility of being that.
It has the possibility.
Does not necessarily mean it is, though.
Okay, can you expound on that a little bit?
it could be. I don't think it's guaranteed, but I think it could be. Because I think of the times when you may be doing well, let me rephrase that. It could add to your ultimate purpose. It could all build up to your purpose, but it may not be your actual purpose at that time. For instance, I used to cut grass with this guy, and I wasn't necessarily good at it, but it taught me a work ethic of how to work and how to fix things and how to adjust things and how to adjust to the terrain and, you know, when to cut when the rain was, maybe the grass was too wet or not wet enough, or so it taught me little bitty things about those things that led to where I am now. But was that my purpose? Well, no, because I didn't. But one, I'm allergic to grass, so that wasn't it. And then two was, that wasn't where I felt most fulfilled in terms of, there's some people that do that and they value their ability to manicure somebody's grass. And they feel completely satisfied that this is my handiwork because of the pride that they take in what they do. And I didn't necessarily have pride in that. I just did it because, honestly, my mom told me to do it. So, but it did add value to who I am now as a person.
Okay, Brother Shelby, go right ahead.
I think that going into a job, it's a step inside. Once I get in and start doing the things that directed or set up for my purpose, I start working toward the things that will help me to get into my purpose and serve for my purpose.
Okay, question is a person's career their purpose? Okay, and this is an important question because, like Sister Thomas, if she's no longer working, so does that mean she no longer has a purpose?
No.
Okay. So what is the important distinguishable difference that we need to make in regards to our careers and identifying our careers as possibly being our purpose, or pursuing careers thinking that in pursuing the right career is to be pursuing the right purpose? How many people go about thinking of purpose solely isolated as the career I do? So in order to fulfill God's purpose, I gotta find the right career. And so they're on a career pursuit and maybe not necessarily a purpose pursuit.
Yeah.
I want to mention to you, I want to suggest anyway, that the two are different. They can be the same.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I'm going to mention this, and we're going to look at this probably a little more in depth in next class that we meet, is because when you go back to the beginning, as I mentioned, everything that we need to know about ourselves, God, and life can be found in those first 3 chapters of the book of Genesis. Okay? We're going to look very closely at the life of Adam when God created him, especially in chapter 2. Adam went about fulfilling his purpose. God gave him work to do, but he also gave him purpose in the work that he was doing. Okay? I want to suggest to us, just to be thinking about, and we'll be exploring it a little further, is that once a person gets clarity on their purpose, they can then actually take their purpose into their work. Okay? All right? So then, my work don't define my purpose. Because if my work defines my purpose, if I don't, there's a work that God has created you to do. And your work and your job or your career, your work and your job and career may not necessarily be one and the same.
So you working at Man Middle School every day with behavioral students. So how do you apply that, your purpose, taken into your work? So what is your purpose?
I'm gonna give, in our next class, I'm gonna give you all my purpose statement that I've worked out, okay?
You can't share a little bit today?
No. That's putting the horse before the cart. Because you'll see, because each one of us, we're gonna be tasked with an assignment, okay, to kind of get clarity in your own way. So I'm gonna show you how I walk, at least came to my understanding. Okay? And here, I wanna say this too. I don't wanna come across and profess that this is possibly the only way to go about doing this, you know. It worked for me. I went through a long number of years pursuing my purpose, and I started out by trying to identify the right career, okay, as that being my purpose. And what I learned is that there is a career path because of money. See, we pursue money, whether we, underneath everything that we do, the belief system is that I'm really chasing money. And what I found out in that pursuit is, it changed my thinking in this regard. A lot of people pursue money, and in the pursuit of money, they have a purpose and a calling, but they don't see themselves being able to make money in that. So they'll manufacture something that they can make money in, and as long as the money lines up, they say that's my purpose. Until they get locked into something and find out that I'm making the money, but I'm still not fulfilled. Y'all, does that make sense? So what I've learned now, and probably more than any other time in history, I had a shift in my thinking in this regard. And it goes back to what we see God demonstrating with Adam in the garden. You can make money. The pursuit is finding your purpose and trusting God to be able to supply your life needs in pursuing that. It's changed my parenting. I wish I knew this when my kids were out. I wish I had the clarity of understanding that I have now when my kids were younger in their lives. Identifying as early as you can what it is that God intended for you to do, irregardless of what that may look like. Not quantifying that based on whether or not you can make a living at it. Most of us, if not all of us, at some point in time, I know I was raised in a generation where the whole motivation of me as a child was to find out a career that I can make a living and support a family. Not necessarily was that the thing that God created me to do. So a lot of people pursue college, for instance, spend thousands of dollars on a career path, get a degree, sometimes an undergrad and grad degree, only to come to the point to where after all of that, they figure out this ain't what I want to do with my life. Mm-hmm. Y'all don't know nobody like that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm talking about in mid-age, changing career paths, only to find out that what I've been pursuing all the time is really not the most important thing. There is something that each one of us, again, when we go back to this idea of understanding our purpose, we gotta understand and actually believe that there is something very unique about me that God placed me here on earth to do. And it's in doing that brings me fulfillment. more than anything else. And whatever that is, God also has now created a creative way of me being able to sustain a livelihood of what that is. We're going to talk about that too. Because what I've learned over time is that's the biggest deterrent to a person fulfilling their purpose. And what the author is advocating here is, oftentimes, now we gotta remember, when we talk about purpose and some of the previous, our previous learning, one of the things that we cannot forget that's really fundamental to help us to really understand what we just read even more accurately. We got to look at God, and we got to look at our life. We got to look at the context of our life in light of understanding who God is and our relationship with Him. We started out at the very outset with the premise of understanding that God purpose is the original intent and what? End result. Our life is finished before we got started. God finished us before He started us. The very fact that we're living is the proof that we have purpose. And so everything that has occurred in our life has been a process of us, God leading us, and when we come to embrace Him, and that's why the idea of being single, what we just left, those contexts are so important, is to understand that everything that I need I already have. So yes, in that sense, every career, every occurrence, every circumstance has been contributing to what it is that God has in store for me in terms of my individual purpose. And when we get clarity on the purpose, and that's why I'll share next class period, Sister Jackson, in regards to my own personal situation. I'm living out part of my purpose in a job. The job is not my purpose. But I do have clarity on what my purpose. The job that I'm actually working actually is contributing to me fulfilling my purpose, however. Yes.
I think too, like every job that you don't get contributes to your purpose too. Because I was just talking to some people the other day, and we were just talking about some of the frustrations when you have your hopes on selling certain jobs or whatever, and they don't come through. And I know from my own life that's happened, and but looking back, how those didn't happen because of purpose. So sometimes when we were in those trenches too, even the jobs that we did get, they do contribute, but the jobs that we did that seemed like we were passed over, those still contribute to purpose too.
That's really good. Because what she just got to articulating is along our journey, there will be opportunities again, and you gotta, this is a real hard one, guys. This is really hard. Because all of us need money to pay the bills, to provide, and that kind of thing. But what I now know at 60, that I didn't know even at 40, is this. I think the author, we talked about this, and it alludes to what Sister Kat just mentioned. You can do a good thing at the expense of doing the right thing. Okay. You can end up taking a wrong job. Okay. And again, it gets to a point to where you begin to be so clear with yourself in your value system. And that's why it's so important to really kind of get clarity on working out your purpose statement. Because in some cases, it'll allow you the guidance to know when to turn certain things down. Okay. Even though in the turning it down, there may be some benefits that you presently don't have in your life. And if that becomes more important than your purpose, and I've been down that road too. Okay? Be right with your sister Mallory. Get her a mic. Okay? I want to pause right there. Anybody got any questions about that? Let me give you an example. Let me kind of give you an example of this, even before I had the clarity. There are a couple of things when we got married, my wife and I, over 40 years ago. There are certain things that certain decisions that we made just because of a value system that we had. That we wouldn't allow money to be the last determining factor whether or not we do make certain choices, certain decisions. One of the things was in how we would raise our kids. For instance, we made a decision before we got started. We didn't know how many kids we were going to have now, but we made this decision. Had no idea that it was before, and they will all be stir steps. Okay, and it kind of make you want to. Once the reality hits, it makes you really challenged with making. I mean, going back and rethinking certain things that you may have said on the front side. Okay, one of the things we decided was that she would stay at home for the first 4 years. I mean, until all the kids got in school. Okay, that's just kind of what we decided to do. And the reason that we made that decision, we made that decision because we felt that the overall well-being and psychological, emotional adjustments of our children would benefit more as her being a homemaker. Okay? And again, we didn't have any idea at the time that we would have 4 children in a row. Okay, so diapers started coming, milk started coming, one income in the house. Okay, there was a whole lot of stuff that we weren't able to do for a long time. I'm talking about almost a decade. Okay, and in the midst of all of that, we had to. There are many moments where we had to rethink whether or not that was really wise and unwise, or change plans in the midst of. But hindsight, looking back, money did not. That was one of the things where we didn't let money dictate that. Now we can look back in hindsight, and we can say, hey, you know what? That payoff, any money that we would have made, career-wise or what otherwise, that payoff was well worth it. Now, what I'm saying to us is there will be, when we talk about purpose, oftentimes when we look at purpose, we look at it in line of solely as a career based on that the career being able to fulfill meeting your financial needs. Now, if you want purpose or career, you really gotta come to terms with that. But here's what I now know is God has allowed, if you pursue your purpose, and the earlier you get clarity on that, you can be as productive financially, probably more, than if you were to chase a career and that's not your purpose. And because that career pays more, you think that it pays more money. What I now believe is you can find that thing that is your purpose, and God provide a source of living from that. In many cases, that probably can exceed anything that you can do in pursuing a career that's not your purpose. You can do it. Because what that does then, by you finding your purpose, it sets you apart from what anybody else is really able to do in the marketplace. It gives you a unique gift of really solving probably a problem that somebody else is not able to do in the unique way that God has created you. So, any questions? Any questions? Did we have somebody with the, oh, Sister Mallory, you had your
Well, just experience in my life, I recognized that I had to recognize God's purpose. And when I was pursuing a career, I focused on what God's purpose was for me in my life. It started off being as a single parent, not a married couple. It started off as being pursued for money. I need to make this amount of money to provide for myself. And then when I started going into my career, it was more like, God, I want to see where you want me and where your purpose is for me. And I think a lot of times when we do that career, we don't think about what God's purpose is in our life and what our abilities are and what he has ordained us to do or as a purpose in our life to do. But in those careers that I have chosen, that I have not really listened to God, the Holy Spirit, and I went by faith, God opened those doors where he did show me purpose in everything that I've done. So everything in my life that I've done brought me all the way back to what I'm doing.
Okay, thank you. Now, let me bring a little more clarity on what we've discussed in this next context. Everybody, we're going to look at, turn to page 65. The context of your cross and how the context of your cross and your career also play a vital part. And this particular context actually is one that's probably overlooked by many. Okay? Because oftentimes what you'll do is you'll find the context of your career, like in my case right now, a lot of what I am doing right now presently is as a result of the context of this next context of my cross, if we can get somebody with a mic and begin reading on page 65. Sister Watson, you got a book open back there?
Yes.
Okay. Page 65, everybody.
The context of your cross. We all have our own cross to bear. The fifth context of purpose discovery is the context of your cross. As you recall, the first context of purpose discovery is the context of your creation. The second is the context of your calling. The third, the context of your clan. The fourth is the context of your career. And the fifth is the context of your cross. Now, the context of your cross is derived from Jesus' statement, "Whoever does not carry his own cross cannot be my disciple." It represents the single thing you choose to do with your life to fulfill God's purpose. It is the only thing you choose in life as a service that meets people's needs in the context of their crisis and glorifies God in heaven. It is your service for the dignity of humanity and the creativity of divinity. Service is the act of giving yourself to a need without expectation of receiving anything back in return. Your cross is your service to God that gives him the glory, works for the good of humanity, and puts going in your gospel message. As long as you keep these three biblical aspects of God's purpose first, God will allow you to collaborate with him in fulfilling your own purpose in life. He will help you fulfill your purpose if you forsake all that comes between you and his purpose in your life.
Okay, forsaking all, notice that last sentence. If you are willing to forsake all that comes between what? You and what? His purpose. Forsaking anything that comes between you and his purpose for your life, which could be a career, which could be success. It could be celebrityism. It could be a lot of things. But the context of your cross, what is your context of your cross as defined? What does the context of your cross mean that we just read, that the author says? It represents what? It represents the what?
The single thing you.
Notice we just got through talking about being single, all right? Okay. It represents the single thing that you choose to do with your life to fulfill God's purpose. The single thing. The single thing. And whatever that single thing is, it has to meet this criteria. It has to meet the criteria of being of service to mankind. Okay. And where we get that notion from? From the very beginning, we started about, we never want to forget this. Whatever our lifelong purpose is, it has to be connected to God's purpose. Notice, discovering God's purpose for my life. Our individual purpose has to be connected with His purpose, or it's not His purpose. And we learned that God's purpose is what? What's God's purpose? We got to be clear on what God's purpose is so that we, at any given time, will always know whether or not what we're doing is connected to that. What is God's purpose?
Reconcile.
Restore and reconcile.
To restore and reconcile mankind back to Himself. Anything that I'm doing that is not accomplishing that is an indice that I'm not fulfilling God's purpose. I don't care what it is. There's a unique, God has put you here uniquely to participate with Him in His purpose. And that is, when I get clarity on that, I'm reconciling and restoring mankind back to Himself. I'm fulfilling and expanding the kingdom of God here on earth. So, whatever it is that I'm doing that's not fulfilling that, you can feel pretty certain that that's not your individual purpose. And when you come into your individual purpose and you begin to, in your individual purpose, partner with God in His purpose, there is nothing more fulfilling than that. Nothing in your life to give you more fulfilling than that. Helping to reconcile and restore mankind back to Himself. Now, here's what I want to leave you with in the assignment. At the end of chapter 8, look at page. Here is what you're tasked to do. On page 72, 73. We're going to end class with this. Everyone is to go over the 5 contexts of purpose discovery, and there are 5 questions. It's dealing with each one of the contexts that we've studied. In your answering these 5 questions from each one of the contexts, you will be ready to develop a purpose statement. Look at page 72 and 73. I'm going to give us an example of what you're to do. Now, if you don't do this exercise, you won't be able to really get clarity on developing a purpose statement. Okay? Like, for instance, these are all of the 5 contexts. And the last sentence before the context is, now please take time to answer the following questions in the 5 contexts of purpose discovery. If you have any questions, refer back to the material in previous chapters. So if you've been taking notes, which I know you're students of the Word and of pursuing your purpose, go back and make reference to anything that we've studied. But in each one of these contexts, notice, here are the questions, like context of your creation. Why do you think God gave you birth, and why are you here? You need to spend some time, if you haven't really been thoughtful or considered any deep thinking about that, you need to spend some time with yourself and answer that question as best you can right now, okay? What gifts, talents, and abilities did you receive at birth that can use for His purpose? We've been over this. Now it's time to actually become reflective of that, okay? D, are there certain things you're able to do naturally, such as math, reading, talking, acting, administrating, and so forth? Answer each one of these questions in each one of these categories. And then next class on Wednesday, what we're going to begin doing, we're going to pick up from there and talk about the answers that you have written out. And then we're going to take it a next step further and explain to you how that doing this exercise can lead you to actually getting clarity and developing a purpose statement. I'm going to share with the class what my purpose statement is and how I was able to construct it based on going through this process. Okay? All right. God bless. We'll see everybody on Wednesday.